The crew of the frailier envoy ship Tellurian Grace had never encountered a species as peculiar as humans. Their mission was straightforward: explore emerging civilizations, assess their development, and if possible, foster interstellar diplomacy. Earth had recently joined the galactic community, a clumsy entrant with bizarre customs, but one that had captured the imagination of millions across the stars. On board the ship was Ambassador Krelthos, a stern and analytical elder of his kind, whose 12 stalk eyes could scan multiple dimensions of thought simultaneously. Yet, none of his impressive faculties could prepare him for humanity's concept of barbecue. It all began when Commander Theo Drake of the Earth delegation invited the crew of the Tellurian Grace to a cultural exchange on Earth. Drake, a man of infectious enthusiasm and unshakable charm, exuded confidence in every syllable. He pitched the idea with the same conviction one might reserve for proposing a peace treaty. "I'm telling you," Drake said, leaning forward during their video conference, "you haven't truly lived until you've tried Earth barbecue. It's transformative." Ambassador Krelthos tilted his elongated head, his spindly fingers steepling together in curiosity. "Barbecue. This term is unfamiliar. Is it a method of sustenance preparation?" Drake grinned. "More than that, my friend. It's an art form, a ritual, a way of life. You'll see. Just bring your best taste receptors." Krelthos considered this with measured skepticism. The frailier valued efficiency and precision in all things, particularly food. Their nutrient cubes provided perfect sustenance, compact, optimized, and devoid of extravagance. The idea of a ritual around eating seemed to Krelthos as excessive as adorning oneself with glitter before combat. Still, curiosity outweighed caution. When the Tellurian Grace touched down on Earth, it was greeted with an appropriately grand ceremony. Bands played, diplomats exchanged pleasantries, and children waved flags. But Theo Drake had no intention of wasting time on formalities. After a brief meet and greet, he whisked Krelthos and his entourage away in a transport vehicle marked with a smiling pig logo. The ambassador's sensory stalks twitched uneasily. "Commander Drake is the pig-an, integral part of this ritual." "Oh, you'll find out soon enough," Drake replied with a wink. The convoy arrived at a sprawling outdoor venue teeming with humans of all shapes and sizes. Smoke wafted into the air, carrying with it aromas so rich and complex that even Krelthos' untrained olfactory system buzzed in response. Rows of grills and smokers lined the area, each manned by individuals wearing aprons emblazoned with phrases like "Meat Wizard" and "Grill Master Supreme." Krelthos' aides whispered in alarm. "Ambassador, we should return to the ship. These humans appear to be engaging in pyrotechnic activities perilously close to combustible materials." Drake overheard and laughed heartily. "Relax. This is all part of the magic." A burly man with a beard like a woolly comet approached, carrying a tray piled high with glistening slabs of meat. "Theo, good to see you again. And these must be our guests of honor." "This is Ambassador Krelthos and his team," Drake introduced. "Guys, meet Big Ray. He's a legend in the barbecue world." Big Ray offered a jovial handshake, though Krelthos hesitated before extending a segmented appendage. The two made contact, and Ray grinned. "Now I've got brisket ribs and pulled pork here. Let's start with the basics." Krelthos leaned closer to the tray, inspecting the offerings with academic rigor. "What precisely are we observing here?" Drake chuckled. "You're observing the pinnacle of human culinary evolution." Big Ray handed Krelthos a plate and a pair of tongs. "Go on. Pick what calls to you." The ambassador hesitated, his many stalks swiveling to observe his team for guidance. They offered none. With reluctant curiosity, he selected a portion of brisket. It was unremarkable at first glance, just a piece of darkened meat. But the moment he brought it to his feeding orifice, a seismic shift occurred. The flavors detonated in his mouth like a supernova. Sweetness, smokiness, tanginess, and an undertone of earthy spice collided in ways his neural processing had no framework to interpret. His sensory stalks flailed uncontrollably. This cannot be possible," he sputtered. "How is this engineered? What chemical processes are responsible?" Drake grinned, arms crossed. "That, my friend, is the magic of low and slow cooking. It's smoked over wood for hours, sometimes days, Every pitmaster has their own techniques and secrets. Krelthos' aides looked equally stupefied. One of them, an ever-cautious skeptic named Brynel, reluctantly tried a bite of pulled pork. Moments later, her eyes widened, and she grabbed another portion. The ambassador struggled to regain his composure. "Commander Drake, you claimed this was an art form. I now understand. This is a manipulation of matter on a scale I had not considered." "Glad you like it," Drake said. "But we're just getting started." Over the next few hours, Krelthos and his team were introduced to an overwhelming array of barbecue-style Kansas City ribs dripping with a molasses-based sauce, Carolina pulled pork brightened with vinegar tang, and Texas-style brisket that practically dissolved on the tongue. Each bite seemed to unlock a new dimension of sensation, leaving the frailer in a daze. Krelthos, uncharacteristically animated, began taking copious notes. "This must be shared with the Council of Cultural Exchange. We must incorporate this technology into our nutrient synthesis systems." Big Ray, overhearing this, laughed so hard he nearly dropped a rack of ribs. "Technology? Son, this ain't tech. It's passion, patience, and know-how. That's what makes it great." The ambassador blinked. "You mean to say this culinary achievement cannot be replicated by artificial means?" "Not if you want it done right," Ray replied. "Barbecue's all about heart." This revelation caused a near crisis among the frailer delegation. A civilization that prided itself on technological mastery was now confronted with something it could neither quantify nor duplicate. Yet the ambassador wasn't deterred. If anything, he was exhilarated. "Commander Drake," he said, "this barbecue. It is the single greatest invention we have encountered in our exploration of the galaxy. I must insist you share your secrets." Drake smirked. "I'd be happy to, but you'll have to get your hands dirty. Barbecue isn't something you just learn from a book. It's an experience." Krelthos considered this. He was a being of intellect and precision, but for the first time, he was willing to embrace the unpredictable. "Very well. Teach me." Drake clapped him on the back. "That's the spirit. Let's get you started with the basics." Ambassador Krelthos had never felt so out of his element. Commander Theo Drake led him to a cooking station where an enormous smoker sat, belching thin wisps of fragrant smoke into the air. The smoker itself looked ancient by human standards, its metal body blackened and scarred from decades of use. A smaller grill beside it glowed with fiery coals, sending waves of heat radiating outward. Krelthos extended a segmented finger toward the smoker. "This device appears primitive. Are you suggesting it is essential to the process?" "Not just essential, it's sacred," Drake said, his face lit with the glow of the coals. "Barbecue is all about controlling the heat, keeping it low and steady, and letting the smoke do its work. You're not cooking the meat, you're transforming it." The ambassador's sensory stalks quivered with skepticism but also with curiosity. "You speak as if this is alchemy." "It might as well be," Drake said with a grin. "Now, let's get started. First, you need to pick your wood." The human gestured to a pile of chopped logs stacked nearby. Krelthos observed the array with scientific scrutiny. Oak, hickory, mesquite, and cherry wood were neatly arranged, each giving off its own distinct scent. Brynel, who had joined them reluctantly after her earlier culinary epiphany, leaned in to whisper to Krelthos. "Ambassador, this seems like an unnecessary variable. Surely a single type of wood would suffice." Drake overheard and wagged a finger. "Oh no, 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 the type of wood determines the flavor of the smoke, and the smoke is the soul of the barbecue. You don't skimp on the soul." Krelthos hesitated before selecting a log of cherry wood. "This one emits a pleasing aroma. Will it suffice?" Drake clapped his hands together. "Excellent choice. Now let's load it into the smoker." As the ambassador awkwardly maneuvered the log into place, Drake demonstrated how to maintain the temperature. He explained the importance of keeping the heat consistent, feeding the fire just enough without letting it rage out of control. Krelthos listened intently, though he found the process alarmingly unpredictable. The frailer, after all, were accustomed to precision instruments and automated systems. The idea of manually tending to a fire struck him as barbaric yet strangely exhilarating. Next came the preparation of the meat. Big Ray returned with a massive slab of ribs, his face glowing with pride. All right, Krelthos, time to season these bad boys. The ambassador tilted his head. Season? I assumed the flavor was derived from the smoke. Drake chuckled. Smoke is just part of the equation. You also need a good rub, a mix of spices that enhances the meat. Here, I'll show you. Drake handed over a bowl of brownish powder and demonstrated how to apply it, rubbing the spices into the ribs with practiced ease. When Krelthos attempted to replicate the motion, his spindly fingers proved ill-suited to the task. Brynol, observing the ambassador's struggles, reluctantly stepped forward. Allow me, Ambassador. I believe my appendages are better equipped for this activity. With surprising grace, Brynol took over, coating the ribs in the spice rub until they glistened with promise. Drake gave her an approving nod. Not bad for your first time. The next step was placing the ribs into the smoker, where they would spend several hours basking in the cherrywood's fragrant embrace. Krelthos found the waiting unbearable. How do you measure progress without direct observation, he asked, his sensory stalks twitching. Drake leaned against the smoker, looking utterly at ease. That's the thing. You don't. BBQ teaches you patience. You've got to trust the process. Patience is not a frailty or virtue, Krelthos muttered. Big Ray roared with laughter. Well, maybe it's time to make it one. As the hours passed, the smoky aroma grew richer, filling the air with an intoxicating scent that even the frailier delegation couldn't resist. Other pitmasters wandered over, curious about the alien participation in their beloved tradition. Some offered advice, while others simply shared beers and stories. One woman, wearing an apron emblazoned with the words "Sauce Boss," handed Krelthos a small jar of her homemade barbecue sauce. Here, try this. It's my special recipe tomato base, brown sugar, a little cayenne for kick. Krelthos inspected the jar with intrigue. This concoction is a secondary enhancement. Drake laughed. You could say that. Some people are purists and prefer the meat without sauce, but most of us think it's the cherry on top. The ambassador dipped a slender digit into the jar and tasted the sauce. His stalks flailed wildly. This is excessively stimulating. How do you calibrate the flavors? The sauce boss grinned. Trial and error, my friend. That's the beauty of it. Krelthos was beginning to understand. Barbecue wasn't just about cooking, it was a chaotic, collaborative dance of experimentation and intuition. It was the antithesis of everything his species valued, and yet it was undeniably compelling. When the ribs were finally ready, Big Ray ceremoniously removed them from the smoker. The meat glistened with a perfect bark, its edges caramelized to a deep mahogany. Krelthos and his team gathered around, their excitement palpable. Drake handed the ambassador a knife. You get the honors. With unsteady hands, Krelthos sliced into the ribs. The meat practically fell off the bone, revealing its tender, smoky interior. The ambassador took a cautious bite and immediately felt a surge of emotion he couldn't identify. Joy? Gratitude? Something deeper? This, he said, his voice trembling, is a masterpiece. A symphony of flavors. How can a civilization capable of such brilliance have a reputation for recklessness? Drake smirked. Maybe it's because we put all our discipline into this. As the frailier delegation devoured the ribs, the humans watched with amusement and pride. Even Brynol, the most stoic of the group, couldn't hide her delight. She gnawed on a rib with unabashed enthusiasm, sauce dripping from her mandibles. Krelthos wiped his feeding orifice with a napkin and turned to Drake. Commander, I must revise my earlier statement. Barbecue is not merely the galaxy's greatest invention, it is its greatest treasure. Drake raised a bottle of beer and a toast. To barbecue bringing the galaxy together, one rib at a time. The humans and frailier cheered, their differences momentarily forgotten in the smoky haze of shared indulgence. The sun began to set, painting the sky with streaks of orange and violet, as the barbecue festival reached its crescendo. Humans bustled between grill stations, balancing plates piled high with ribs, brisket, and pulled pork, their faces glowing with satisfaction. The frailier delegation, however, had grown uncharacteristically quiet, their focus wholly absorbed by the feast. Ambassador Krelthos leaned back in his chair, his sensory stalk swaying gently in the evening breeze. His meticulous notes lay forgotten on the table, stained with smudges of sauce. For the first time in his career, he wasn't consumed by analysis or critique. He was simply enjoying. "You all right?" Ambassador Commander Drake asked, sitting beside him with a grin. "I am." Recalibrating my perspective, Krelthos replied, his voice tinged with awe. "Your species possesses an astonishing ability to create harmony from chaos. This barbecue, this culinary ritual, is both irrational and transcendent." Drake chuckled. "You're not wrong. But you haven't seen the full picture yet. Ready for the next step?" Krelthos tilted his head. "There is more." "Oh, there's always more," Drake said, standing. He gestured for the frailer delegation to follow, leading them toward a cluster of tables where humans were gathered in heated discussion. The group was surrounded by bottles of sauces, jars of rubs, and a bewildering array of side dishes. "What is this gathering?" Krelthos asked. "It's the sauce competition," Drake explained. "Barbecue isn't just about the meat. The sauce is where a lot of the personality shines through. Each region and sometimes each person has their own recipe. It's practically a science." A stout man in a cowboy hat overheard and turned with a grin. "Science? Nah, it's art. You gotta feel it in your bones." Krelthos' stalks twitched. "A subjective methodology? How do you determine which sauce is superior?" The man chuckled. "That's the fun part, you don't. Everyone's got their own favorite. You just gotta try 'em all." Drake handed Krelthos a small wooden paddle fitted with several shallow bowls, each filled with a different sauce. "Go ahead, give it a shot." The ambassador hesitated, then dipped a spoon into the first bowl. The sauce was tangy and bright, with a sharp vinegar kick that made his neural pathways spark. The next one was rich and smoky, with a slow-building heat that lingered long after the bite. Each sauce was a revelation, a new perspective on an already complex dish. By the time Krelthos reached the last bowl, his sensory stalks were twitching uncontrollably. Each of these is a unique expression of flavor. It is as though your species has encoded your individuality into your cuisine. "That's barbecue for you," Drake said. "It's as much about the people as it is about the food." One of Krelthos' aides, Brynel, stepped forward with uncharacteristic eagerness. "Ambassador, I believe we should request samples of these sauces for further study. Perhaps we can integrate their principles into our nutrient systems." Before Krelthos could respond, a cheerful woman approached, carrying a tray of desserts. "Why all can't leave without trying some cobbler." Drake took a plate and passed it to Krelthos. "This is peach cobbler. It's not barbecue, but it's part of the experience." The ambassador inspected the dish. It was a bubbling mixture of golden fruit and flaky crust, topped with a dollop of cream. He took a tentative bite, and his sensory stalks froze mid-sway. This is an entirely separate dimension of excellence," he said, his voice reverent. "Your species' capacity for culinary innovation is boundless." The humans around him laughed, clinking their beer bottles in celebration. Krelthos watched them with a growing sense of admiration. He had spent his life navigating the intricacies of interstellar diplomacy, analyzing the strengths and weaknesses of countless civilizations. Yet here, in this smoky, chaotic festival, he saw something he hadn't encountered before: unity through shared joy. As the evening wore on, the frailer delegation found themselves drawn into the festival's camaraderie. Brynel, who had initially regarded the event with disdain, was now deep in conversation with Big Ray about the merits of dry rubs versus marinades. Another aide, Eurus, had joined a group of humans attempting to create the perfect smoked sausage. Even Krelthos, ever the stoic, was seen exchanging recipes with the sauce boss, his segmented fingers awkwardly jotting notes on a grease-stained napkin. The turning point came when the festival organizers invited Krelthos to join the judging panel for the sauce competition. It was an unprecedented honor, one that the ambassador accepted with a mixture of pride and trepidation. He took his role seriously, carefully evaluating each entry and offering detailed feedback that left the human contestants both amused and impressed. At the end of the night, as the winners were announced and trophies handed out, Krelthos stood to address the crowd. His voice, amplified by a makeshift microphone, carried a weight of sincerity that silenced the boisterous festival-goers. Humans. He began, his sensory stalks raised high. You have given me a gift beyond measure. Your barbecue is not merely sustenance, it is a celebration of creativity, collaboration, and identity. It transcends logic and defies replication. Yet it is accessible to all. I will return to my people with this knowledge, and I will share your story with the galaxy. You have not only enriched my understanding of your culture, you have enriched my soul. The crowd erupted into cheers and applause, lifting their plates and bottles in a toast to the ambassador. Drake, standing beside him, clapped him on the back. Well said, Krelthos. Welcome to the barbecue family. As the Fralier delegation prepared to depart, Krelthos took one last look at the festival. Smoke still curled into the night sky, carrying with it the mingling sense of wood and meat, spice and flame. It was, he realized, a fitting metaphor for humanity itself, chaotic, unpredictable, and impossibly beautiful. When he boarded the Talorian Grace, his aides crowded around him with questions and suggestions, each eager to document and analyze their experience. But for the first time, Krelthos waved them away. Not tonight, he said, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. Some things are meant to be experienced, not dissected. As the ship lifted off, leaving Earth behind, Krelthos allowed himself a rare smile. He knew that this was only the beginning. The Talorian Grace ascended smoothly into Earth's atmosphere, its shimmering hull reflecting the blue-green glow of the planet below. Ambassador Krelthos reclined in his observation chamber, surrounded by the quiet hum of Fralier technology. On the table before him sat a collection of items he'd brought from the barbecue festival: jars of sauces, a small bag of wood chips, and a handwritten recipe for something called smoked turkey legs that Big Ray had pressed into his hands before they departed. He turned one of his sensory stalks toward the viewport, watching as Earth grew smaller. Despite its modest stature compared to some galactic giants, it now loomed large in his mind, a beacon of cultural complexity and boundless creativity. Krelthos had visited countless worlds and studied civilizations with technologies far surpassing Earth's, yet no experience had left such an indelible impression on him. Ambassador Brannel interrupted, stepping into the chamber. We've compiled the preliminary report on the cultural exchange. Krelthos gestured for her to proceed, though his attention remained fixed on the viewport. The delegation unanimously agrees that Earth's barbecue represents a unique cultural phenomenon, she began. We recommend prioritizing further study and potential integration into our diplomatic protocols. However, there is some disagreement on how best to approach dissemination within the Council of Cultural Exchange. Krelthos finally turned to face her. Disagreement? Elaborate. Brannel's mandibles twitched in mild discomfort. Some believe that the unstructured nature of barbecue may be perceived as undignified by the Council. They worry it may undermine the Fralier image of precision and efficiency. Krelthos let out a low hum, his equivalent of a thoughtful sigh. Do you share this concern? I. Brannel hesitated, then straightened her posture. No, Ambassador. I believe the value of this discovery outweighs any perceived impropriety. A faint smile crossed Krelthos' features. Good. Prepare a demonstration upon our return. We will show them what we experienced, not merely describe it. Brannel blinked in surprise. A demonstration. Yes, Krelthos said, his voice firm. Barbecue cannot be understood through words alone. It must be felt, tasted, and savored. Arrange for a gathering of the Council's most influential members. I will handle the specifics. Brannel hesitated for only a moment before nodding. As you wish, Ambassador. Weeks later, the Grand Hall of Cultural Exchange on the Fralier homeworld buzzed with subdued excitement. The Council, composed of dignitaries and representatives from dozens of allied civilizations, rarely gathered in such numbers. They had come expecting a formal report on the recent Earth mission, accompanied by the usual projections and data models. What greeted them instead was something entirely unexpected. A row of large cylindrical devices smokers stood in the center of the hall, their exteriors gleaming under the ambient light. Around them bustled a team of Fralier aides, their their precise movements juxtaposed against the smoky unpredictability of the devices they tended. The scent of wood and spices filled the air, causing some council members to twitch their sensory appendages in confusion and intrigue. At the head of the assembly, Ambassador Krelthos stood with Commander Theo Drake, who had graciously agreed to assist in the demonstration. Drake, wearing his well-worn meat wizard apron, exuded the relaxed confidence of a man entirely in his element. Ambassador Krelthos, a stern council member, began, his voice echoing through the hall. "This is highly irregular. We expected a comprehensive report, not this." Precisely, another added, her antennae quivering in disapproval. "What is the purpose of these contraptions?" Krelthos raised a calming hand. "Esteemed colleagues, I assure you, all will become clear. What you see before you is not merely a cooking apparatus. It is a cultural artifact, a symbol of human ingenuity and unity. But to understand it, you must experience it." Drake stepped forward with a wide grin. "All right, folks, let's fire these bad boys up." As the demonstration began, the frailier aides followed Drake's instructions with meticulous care, though the process tested their patience. They seasoned ribs, monitored temperatures, and carefully adjusted the flow of smoke, all under Drake's watchful eye. The council members, initially skeptical, found themselves drawn in by the evolving aroma. Hours later, as the first slabs of ribs emerged from the smokers, Krelthos addressed the crowd. "On Earth, barbecue is more than food. It is a communal act, a way of bringing people together. It requires patience, collaboration, and trust, qualities that transcend species and cultures." Drake began slicing the ribs, distributing portions to the assembled dignitaries. The first bites were met with stunned silence, followed by a ripple of astonished murmurs. A representative from the crystalline Viroth species emitted a harmonic trill of approval, while a reptilian dignitary from the Krenzar alliance thumped his tail against the floor in delight. "This is extraordinary," one council member exclaimed, her usually reserved demeanor replaced with unrestrained enthusiasm. "How does such complexity arise from such a simple process?" Krelthos gestured toward Drake. "The humans have a saying, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Barbecue exemplifies this truth." The council members continued to eat, their initial reservations melting away with each bite. Even the most skeptical among them began to nod in agreement, their sensory appendages twitching in appreciation. By the time the meal concluded, the mood in the hall had transformed from skepticism to admiration. In the days that followed, the Council of Cultural Exchange formally recognized Earth barbecue as a cultural masterwork of galactic significance. Plans were drawn to establish barbecue festivals on frailier worlds, complete with imported Earth ingredients and pit masters to oversee the process. Trade agreements were revised to prioritize the exchange of wood, spices, and sauces. Krelthos, now hailed as a visionary among his peers, reflected on the experience with quiet satisfaction. Barbecue had not only bridged a cultural gap, it had reminded him, and countless others, of the power of shared joy. As the Talorian Grace prepared for its next mission, Drake joined Krelthos in the observation chamber for one last toast. They raised their glasses, Krelthos with his nutrient slurry, Drake with a bottle of Earth beer, and clinked them together. "To barbecue," Krelthos said, his sensory stalk swaying in an almost celebratory rhythm. "And to good company," Drake added, grinning. As the ship slipped into the vast expanse of space, the smoky memory of Earth lingered, a reminder that even in a galaxy of infinite wonders, some of the greatest treasures were born of fire, patience, and the simple act of coming together.